Welcome back to State of the Union. My guest now is a Republican senator who thinks America's immigration system should be, quote, compassion meets the rule of law. Senator John Kernus of Utah is here with me now in studio. Thank you so much for being here. It's nice to see you. You just heard me speak with the border czar,
Yes.
Tom Homan. Is that the kind of compassionate immigration enforcement you have in mind?
You know, it reminded me of a painful conversation. And sadly, a lot of times when we're talking about immigration, it's just painful. It really is. I absolutely believe it's a false narrative that we can't have rule of law and compassion at the same time. But I think we're getting compassion. We're really struggling with compassion. And for instance, going back to the Biden administration, we were told it was compassion to have an open border. It wasn't. That's not compassion. And now what's happening in our cities also feels like it's not compassion.
So what should they be doing better?
Well, listen, you know, I was mayor. If I were mayor, the very first thing I would do is I'd sit down with ICE and I say, I want the bad guys out of my city. And I want my citizens to feel safe. Now let's do that. And too much of that isn't happening. It's like us against them. I don't think these protesters are compassionate. I think that to the extent that ICE is not transparent, it brings this fear into a community. And we've got to get rid of that fear. We've got to get rid of the bad guys and to be compassionate at the same time. We can do it.
Just on specifically what's happening in Minnesota and the Somali community, President Trump is ramping up his attacks against Somali immigrants. He said this week they are, quote, garbage, and that he doesn't want them in the country, and they should go back to where they came from. Now, after Charlie Kirk was murdered in your state, everybody talked about turning down the rhetoric, full stop.
Yeah. So listen, I've learned, sadly, I can't control anybody but me, right? And the best thing I can do is set my example. And I think all of us need to wake up every morning, look in the mirror and say, what are we doing? What am I doing specifically today to make this country a better country, to make all of our immigrants feel more welcome? That's what we've always had. And I think if more of us would do that, it would matter less what individuals said.
Right. But as you know, he's not just an individual. He's the president of the United States, calling an entire community garbage.
So, you know, it wasn't very long ago, just a little year ago, that we elected him. And we knew very well what we were electing at the time. The country wanted a disruptor. And he's put disruptors into place, Tom Homo and things like that. And that disruption is very, very painful. But you have to remember the reason I think the country went that direction is they were very uncomfortable with a number of things we were doing in this country. And we wanted a disruptor. And for good or bad, that's what disruption brings.
I want to ask you about the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Just this week, a government watchdog report found that his use of the Signal chat put American troops at risk, what he said in that chat. Lawmakers are continuing to look at his involvement in that double tap strike in the Caribbean on an alleged drug boat. If you were to take the confirmation vote again today, would you vote to make Pete Hegseth Defense Secretary?
That's a question I can't answer without as much thoughtful research as I did the first time I did that vote. I think you might.
Now you have evidence, not research.
Yeah, but you know what the reality of it is, if you go on what's in the newspapers, it's near impossible to know exactly what's going on. We heard one day that he had put an order in to kill the survivors. The next day we're hearing something else, and the next day we're hearing something else. But I will tell you, I am pleased with Congress's role of oversight. I think we're doing a really good job of demanding answers and getting answers. I chair the Western Hemisphere subcommittee, and we're going to have a hearing on this. You're having other hearings, and I think Congress really wants to know exactly what's happening and the real facts, not what's reported in the newspaper. And if you go back to his confirmation, that's what I tried really, really hard to do, is like separate out what we're hearing. Let's get to the real facts and let's make a good decision.
You said that you are going to have a hearing in the subcommittee that you chair in Western Hemisphere. Are you going to try to get the players involved in that to come up and testify?
Yeah, so listen, if I had a magic wand, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now,
my
reality of it
You're
is...
You're an oversight chair.
Yeah, but I don't get subpoena authority, right? I don't get to demand that they come. But I think my members on the subcommittee want answers, both Republicans and Democrats. I think you're seeing that on the full committee. The chair and the ranking member are also asking for answers. You're seeing that not just on the Foreign Relations Committee, but I think you're seeing a pretty good bipartisan quest for answers.
But are you sure about that? Because certainly it seemed that way last weekend and the beginning of the week. But then as the week evolved and the top Republican, the top Democrat on the intel committees, for example, and on Armed Services saw the video, there were definitely divergent perceptions of what they saw. And then yesterday, Pete Hegseth said he's not sure that he'll actually release the video. Are you confident you'll see the video, and should it be released?
So listen, there's always a fine line between classified and unclassified. I think if you're going to err, in my opinion, you err on the side of transparency. When we're not transparent, it just fuels.
So it should be released?
I haven't seen it, so I really don't know what's classified and what's not, but I just feel like let's err on the side of transparency. The American people, they like to make decisions too based on facts, not just on what we tell them. And the more we can give them that information, the more comfortable they're going to feel. And that's actually one of the ways we're actually going to restore trust in government, is by being more transparent.
We'd love to see that. Let's talk about what's happening in the U.S. Senate this coming week. There is going to be a vote on Thursday to extend the Obamacare subsidies that are running out at the end of the year. I don't need to tell you, 1 in 10 constituents of yours in Utah are on Obamacare. How are you going to vote?
So sadly, this is not really a serious effort. Just to extend 3 years, something that has not been working, that was meant to be temporary from the beginning, is not a good vote. We know, look, we need a minimum premium for people, even if it's a couple of bucks. We know we need a cap on income. That's not a serious effort if you're not willing to talk about, look, we know there's flaws with these, and we're not willing to change those flaws. Sadly, there are a lot of Republicans and Democrats talking about both two things. One is, how do we actually lower the cost, not just of insurance, but of health care? And then what do we do in the interim while we're waiting to do that? Those are two really questions that we're not having thoughtful conversation about, and I don't get a thoughtful vote next week. That's not a thoughtful vote to say we're just going to extend what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's fair. And the fact that there aren't thoughtful conversations after all of these years is, says a lot about the institution in which you serve. But separate from that, the short term, it's 10 legislative days between now and when the premiums of the existing program do run out. So we're talking about people who are really going to suffer while you're saying Congress isn't talking to each other. Can you at least, would you at least be willing to put a Band-Aid on?
You can't have this conversation without saying, we took 6 or 7 weeks away from this conversation while we had this silly shutdown. We wasted valuable time. These conversations were going on before the shutdown. They totally stopped during the shutdown. But even under that, in the best of circumstances, these are complicated issues that you're not just going to be able to throw out there in a couple of weeks.
The president called the term affordability, or just the notion of affordability, a con job. I think that's the right message from the messenger in chief?
So listen, a year or two ago, when we were told inflation was transitory, you can't tell people who are buying food at the store, they know. My wife came back the other day and said, this Thanksgiving dinner is going to cost us, and she gave me a number. People know costs are up. As Republicans, as Democrats, as elected officials, we would be wise to realize that really matters to people, and we need to be taking that into account in every decision that we make.
Algorithm. The algorithms in
for
social
that up,
media.
yeah.
Yes, I'm obsessed with this as a parent, as every parent is and should be. You have a bill, bipartisan bill with Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, calling on social media companies to bear responsibility if their algorithms cause harm to everyday Americans. I know that your goal is to get social media companies to change the algorithms, but do you really think that's realistic? They certainly haven't been willing to change.
Let me slightly alter that. The goal is not to get them to change it. The goal is to get them to be accountable. So a lot of what happens with social media is very, very good. My daughters will tell you they like things showing up that they want to buy. That's not harmful necessarily, but it can be. And so any industry, if you make an automobile and have a bad product, we hold you liable. If you make a medicine and it's a bad product, we hold you liable. Why don't we have that same philosophy with our social media companies? And without that, there are no guardrails, right? There's nothing holding them back, and we know some very, very bad things happen with these algorithms.
Traction? You have traction on this?
Absolutely. I'm really pleased. I had 2 co-sponsors jump on it, Republican, Democrat, very quickly in the House, and they're great co-sponsors. And all my conversations with my colleagues are, yes, we need to do something. And they're finally pleased that somebody has actually got a proposal out there so we can start having this conversation.
Senator Curtis of the
Yeah.
great state of Utah, thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here.
It's great to be with you Sunday morning. Take care. Yeah.
Appreciate